Is that something that you were thinking of before H4957? Is that something that it was after? Kind of how did that all position itself when McMaster signed that in back in May?
That's right. Before, David. And listen, I think it's a coalescence of the strategy that we've had for the last couple of years with Capco, again, our in-house rights that we bring to market and engage throughout the university, quite frankly, meaning assets and student opportunities and internships, right? We were able to uniquely do that internally. So there's been a natural progression of, hey, let's take a next step there to grow the staff and the scope, coupled with changing landscape, right? House case, revenue share, therefore revenue generation, and how do we continue to get creative and look to the private sector, the professional sector for how they structure and monetize, but then how do we pull that forward here to Clemson and still keep the collegiate model that's unique to higher education or Clemson athletics, but do it in a much more strategic way. So the answer to your question is before maybe the governance changes from an NCAA or a state law standpoint, but that is those changes certainly give us even more flexibility to be aggressive in this space.
Hey, Graham. Pete. And no way, I mean, Dabo would just be getting warmed up at this point.
Thank you.
Okay. Not even close. But with a lot of what we heard about, or a lot of what we've heard on the House settlement so far is how it's suddenly going to shrink available money and the planning that goes into it. Yet this summer, there's construction going on outside. A bunch of your coaches got raises and things like that. How do you balance all that? Is it going to be harder to make those kind of decisions going forward once this House settlement kicks in?
Well framed, Pete. And yeah, it's going to be more complex, right? And I would tell you within circles of ADs and our conference and just colleagues around the country, right? We're all trying to look to how do we reprioritize, find efficiencies, redeploy our capital, so to speak, from just a business sector mindset. And you're right. Listen, we're going to continue our posture is going to continue to invest. And that means coaches. We just ran through those, and we're going to continue to leverage certainly revenue generating activities, investments, sports programs, right? There's a business strategy to that we're going to continue to and be reactive to the market. Maybe is not the best phrase, but recognizing and aggressive within the market. That's going to continue to shift. And sure, that means coaches, that means facilities and footprint and how your operations are. So you're right, and we're going to continue to build, but there's a redeployment. And I would, to be honest, there's plenty of facilities on our to-do list that probably have a little bit of a different timeline with them now. While there's still going to be investment and development of facilities and retention of coaches and key revenue initiatives. So the answer is yes, much more complex, and it's so interesting that we're in this transitory period, right? Because now we have pretty good direction with where the House settlement is headed and some of the construct around it. But the quintessential building the plane while we fly it as an industry, let alone local decisions, part of your point, there's still so much uncertainty around the implementation details, any adjustments legally or from the settlement articulation. So, but listen, we've been very engaged with all 16 of our coaches and educating and equipping them with, here's our understanding of it. Our phrase that we've been using is, in the absence of certainty, right? There's not a whole lot certain right now in college athletics, house case or otherwise. But for us administratively in my role to provide as much clarity as possible. That means transparency with our coaches, with our student athletes, with our staff, with our community, right? In IPTAY, et cetera. So that balance is kind of how we think about it and while we're going to be redeploying priorities and investments.
You mentioned about IPTAY and their annual and setting a record and all that, but obviously that's with scholarships and that stuff. How do you educate the IPTAY people why it's so important future to other ventures that you mentioned you're putting out there? that they continue to give to the athletic department in a different way. How is that message going, and what is the plan for that message?
Yeah, well said. We're just getting into fall giving year, right? And now tickets and parking, and so we're kind of off and running into the year ahead. And so, a lot of that marketing and messaging is to come, so to speak. That being said, listen, within a house case, here's how we talk about house case, maybe strategy or build. And I'll try to articulate it my mind's eye here from a pyramid standpoint, right? And really three components of house case: expanded scholarships or deregulated scholarships. We can provide more scholarships to all of our sports and student athletes. There's the revenue share component, right? And then there's still NIL on top of that, and what's the enforcement and mechanisms around it. And so we intend to, and we are working to be able to invest heavily in all three of those areas. And again, Clemson Ventures is a component to the revenue generation, but even particularly the NIL agency aspect. That being said, back to your question from our IPTAY supporters and 22,000 plus donors, the foundation of this pillar, this is still higher education. It's scholastic in nature. It's scholarships. It's the support, the academic support, nutrition, personal development, programming. That remains foundational, and that's going to affect all 21 of our sports, 600 student athletes. And because of the house case, that foundation is able to be wider. We're able to offer more scholarships. 11.7 is a number that this group well knows, Henny, Will, with baseball. And so now, right, a year from now, we anticipate, or the direction is that in baseball in particular, right, 34 scholarships. And again, you extrapolate that amongst all of our 21 sports. And so that is not revenue share. That is not NIL. That's scholarships. That's real foundational in nature. And that is something that Clemson has been great at, and IPTAY for 90 years has been great at the support of that. And so now we're going to continue to leverage and invest at that foundation of that pyramid. And so that affects, and so that's the message, and we'll answer your question, that, hey, IPTAY and donors and supporters, we need you now more than ever, because the bottom of this pyramid can be wider, and we want it to be a really wide, underpinned base. And now, layer up of the pyramid, so to speak, is revenue share, and how we look to invest that. And that's now allowable, so to speak, or will be from a house case, and we need to be fully invested. We intend to be fully invested and strategic about the deployment of revenue share opportunities. And then again, beyond that, the top of the pyramid, so to speak, is NIL opportunities. And so again, back to Clemson Ventures, NIL agency, and NIL is going to remain very, very important in the future changed collegiate model. It's all underpinned, back to your question, Will, of education, scholastic nature, financial aid, scholarship support for our student athletes.
I guess have you gotten the sense, like obviously Dabo's kind of disappointed in terms of maybe the walk-on component in football might go away. Do you have a sense that you'll need to go to a full 105 full scholarships to be competitive, or is there a chance that there could be partials in that roster? Have you discussed that with him? Maybe an idea on that?
Very much so, John. That it couldn't be more active conversation within the industry, sure, and certainly for Coach and I, kind of when started getting a sense of the direction of the house case settlement in numbers, and again the change of scholarship limit removal, but roster limit creations, and then what that looked like for football. I probably made the mistake to have an hour with Coach Sweeney very early on. I feel like he was one of the first coaches that we kind of had this, let's talk on the realities of where maybe this is headed. So he and I had an hour, I think, mutually blocked off on my calendar, and 2.5 hours later, I was late for a staff meeting, and we were, chopping it all up. So that was my mistake. I'm better than that with him. But that being said, yes, got it. It's very active. To answer your question, hey, 105, certainly the full resources of scholarships for 105 or wherever the number may land is our intention and support for football. How exactly Coach looks to deploy that or transition into that and balance current roster with recruiting and quite frankly, part of the difficulty and the uncertainty of the number and the how do you scholarship it is the transition time. Right, because we all know that football seasonally, and this really affects all of our fall sports, soccer, volleyball, that their seasons end in the fall semester by and large, and that's where a lot of their roster changes happen, whether that's transfer portal windows are at that point. Certainly high school signings, and in football, often, obviously, a lot of them enroll early in January. But at this point we project, or as we learn more information from the House case, that still in January that number may be 85, but that number might not tick up to 105 or whatever the number may be, until later on or maybe next academic year. So there's a timing, strategy and uncertainty with it, and that is also laced, John, with your question of, hey, exactly how much do you jump into it, or do you do the full 105? A lot of questions, but a very active engagement for Coach and I, sure, but then certainly our staff and football management, let alone the rest of our sports. This has implications too as well.
It's the first time we've talked to you since Clemson sued the ACC. Just what you can say about that, and how's that impacted, if at all, your working relationship with Jim Phillips or in these conference meetings and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's right, Chapel, and yeah, you've been very engaged and present in some of the legal proceedings. You can certainly respect, right? There's not a whole lot of in-depth I can go there. We'll let the court process play out, and our legal team continue to lead that strategy. To the second part of your question, and Commissioner Phelps, I thought, had some really appropriate and shared perspective and comments at Football Media Days in July about his lens on just the professional nature of the relationships and what his role is, and what athletic directors' roles are, my role is, and so we're going to continue to act. And I couldn't have felt more supported from his chair in the day-to-day, right, and with my certainly colleagues around the ACC table, so to speak. And I've been real consistent with our staff and our coaches and our student athletes about the expectations for us to be great members of the conference we're in. I know that's been a message point of mine that I have been and will remain consistent on. And that means big picture of how we're positioning and strategizing for Clemson in a fluid, dynamic environment, but also day to day, right? And how we compete and how we are professional in the settings and circles that we're all in variously. And so the consistency, I guess I'm reciprocating maybe some of Commissioner Phillips' comments on the professionalization of it, or professional nature of it, but also for us to continue to do what's best for Clemson. Which is leveraging which is shown by our strategy to continue to be able to navigate in the changing landscape.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, how do you feel about that success initiative that Phillips talked about during the summer?
Yeah, it was rolled out last fall, I believe it was, and certainly there was a lot of work that went into that for the months and years preceding. An innovative, a forward-moving approach by the ACC, for sure. And certainly for us, of how we're invested in football and have had significant performance in football and expectations in football, we do anticipate to capture some of that, and that's the basis of the success initiatives. But so it's done to incentivize investment to create performance, and now that we're active in that and running a budget and business in that. Eager to gain success within it, yeah.
And off of that, obviously this has been a crazy summer, even spring and summer with rumors. Every day, Clemson is headed here, Clemson's headed to the Big 12, Clemson's going to do this, Clemson's going to do that, but I get a feeling, and because we haven't talked to you, that's why I'm asking this, that whatever a next step is, whether that is staying in the ACC, getting more media rights money, whatever, that nothing's going to happen until this is adjudicated in a court of law. Is that fair to say?
There's plenty written, right? All the speculation, right? And read. Well, I don't know if I read all of it, but it's part of my job to be very engaged in. Sure, what's written, great, but more of the really where a lot of the moving parts and maybe conversations are nationally, and so we do that. And to answer your question, David, not sure. Again, I'll kind of pass on the legal sequencing of that, only to say that we're going to continue to have our legal team work the legal process with it and act incredibly professional and be great members of the conference we're in, and be really well read and connected nationally with all of the moving parts. However, those continue to show themselves. It has never been more active. Just with the national landscape of all the moving parts within college athletics. A lot of what I've talked about, not just specifically conference membership. So that's the A to B to C, David. Not sure. We're going to continue to let the legal process play out. We're going to be great. We, Clemson, are going to be great members of the conference we're in. That starts with me, but all of our coaches and student athletes in institution, and also be really well-read and engaged nationally. That's incredibly important.
Graham, transfers are obviously another big part of the picture, that players can go wherever they want, when they want, and when they decide. How has Clemson kind of just tried to direct coaches, or not direct coaches, but talk with coaches about keeping players engaged and having the things that make them want to stay and not go elsewhere? That's
right, Pete. I think it's a lot of it, a couple of ways to think about it. A lot of it does come back to some of our discussion with Will earlier of just the key foundational elements of college athletics that I'm biased, but I think Clemson, we invest, we position, we support our student athletes on the fields and off as good as anybody in the country, right? And our teams recruit to that, and we attract, right, the fit that of student athletes and staffs and programs. I just think is so unique and connected at Clemson. That being said, and I know there's stats out there that speak to our retention efforts for all of our sports, sure, not just football. And I think we index really well on some of those stats or the retention components because of a lot of things that I just talked about. But that being said, 21 sports with 16 different head coaches, there are different levels of status isn't the right word. Each of our coaches are equipped and have a different vision and strategy for how they run their programs. And every sport's a little different, right? With the calendar, with roster strategy and playing time, right? A lot of what you're speaking to, Pete. And, and that's where I lean back to some of my early comments on our coaches and investment, continued investment, where we have great coaches that lead their programs incredibly well. That means competitively, but also ensure roster management and the vision and strategy that they have for where their programs are at. And so that shows itself very differently. And I would tell you that our head coaches group, I've talked on it a time or two here, we've set up, and it's very intentional from my lens, to have great collaboration and work and support, and camaraderie is a good word for that group. And they all do it a little different, right? They all manage their rosters, all of them. But I think they learn so much from each other, and there's a lot of synergy amongst that. And I've seen strategies kind of ported across sport, and I know that just comes from us being here at Clemson, the culture of our department, and really the culture of that head coaching group. So it's going to continue to evolve. It's evolved a lot in the last 3 years, 5 years, I guess, from a transfer deregulation, and we know that the model ahead is that's only going to look different.
I've got to ask too. I mean, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of Clemson fans who are very passionate about football, who ask you, when is your football coach? Why can't we get transfers in like some of these other schools there? Have you ever talked with Dabo about that? Are you comfortable with how Dabo manages his roster and keeps players?
Couldn't be more convicted and supportive of Coach Sweeney, two-time national champion head coach, and how he has built his current program and where he's at, and let alone where his strategies and nimbleness, quite frankly, is ahead. And so, yeah, we talk about it, but in a supportive way and a understanding vision and strategy, and how do we continue to be adaptable in a changing landscape. Sure, that means roster management, but that also means, or particularly means, a lot of things that we've talked about. So absolutely, that's active engagement with me and Coach, but just in a very supportive, equipping him in particular, but the other 15 of our head coaches and how they run their program and build their rosters.
And off of that, I know, I think Dave Doran and mentioned it, they kind of went to an NFL model and how he's handled roster management. Alabama just hired basically a GM, if you will, to kind of help with theirs. Is this something you talked to Coach Sweeney about going forward, and as you kind of get more into the house stuff?
It is. Yeah, Will, it's a very active discussion in the industry, of course. And again, you talked on some of those moving parts. I know Coach Sweeney, I think at the beginning of camp, rolled out some of our staff enrolled duty changes within the football program. I anticipate those to continue to evolve, and us adding expertise and resources, whatever that may be, right? It's not, I'm not foretelling anything other than very active discussion. And sure, look into all aspects of how, quite frankly, outside of college athletics, to your point on the reference with pro sports, very active. So I know Jordan Sorrell's in our staff. We have great relationships and dialogue outside of even the college athletic space on that, and Coach Sweeney's very, very active in that. And again, back to Pete's question, my support, my connectivity with that to help understand and strategize, and then support on that is very active, and we're just kind of at the precipice of that while we're having to manage and again understand the direction with house case and timing and the uncertainty of the sequencing. So back to the airplane while you fly it, but us pulling in all different resources and structure and staff, right? Expect that to continue, and us to be very aggressive in how we invest and bring expertise and staff to do so.
I guess going back to the revenue generation piece.